Hello and welcome to the Tech Report podcast. We are live on Twitch right now and recording live on our hard drives, which is very exciting. And unfortunately this evening, our usual host Luke is not with us. He said he was hoping to join us, and then he was like, not very good internet here, and he's like Honduras or somewhere. So that wasn't going to work out. So unfortunately, Luke isn't able to join us. But the three of us are here. I've got Ben. Hey, Ben.
Hello.
And Jeff Cameron,
hey,
our managing editor. And we are ready to do this. And guys, we have a lot to discuss because we did not have a podcast last week, and because since the last podcast, we have had the TR barbecue, which Jeff and I both attended, and Ben completely failed to attend. And then we had the Intel Developers Forum last week, in which Intel made some news, and we've got a bunch of things to discuss about that and other stuff that has happened. Actually, a fair amount has happened today. So we have a lot to cover on the podcast, and we have some questions from the readers. If you are watching in the chat now or listening and you want to just put a question into the panel, go ahead and put it into the chat. We're collecting those, and we'll try to answer them live on the show. So, Jeff, this was your first attempt at attending a TR barbecue. What did you think?
Oh, it exceeded my wildest expectations. Like, it's a beautiful setting, great people, great food, and amazing fireworks. So, A+ would recommend.
Yeah, this is year 12, and it's a community thing. Basically, Dr. Fish in the forums runs it. It's his setting, it's his house, and it's basically his show. We all kind of chip in to help make it happen, but he's the guy. And he has, over time, along with everybody else who helped out, including Z-Girl, who did the ribs, and Shoes, who did the fireworks, we really figured out how to do the various pieces of this to make it come together. So this is one of the best ones. We had a cornhole tournament, throw in the bean bags and the little wooden things, and gave away a GeForce GTX 980 Ti and multiple Fractal Design R5 Snow. They call it Snow Edition or white. I don't know. They're white.
They're just white.
They're white cases, which are rare. Thanks to the guys at EVGA and Fractal for making that happen. And I don't know. Jeff? Did you see what happened around the Id Chafee, who won the grand prize? And
I did not.
And Frobaz, who did not win the grand prize.
Yeah.
Basically, Id Chafee isn't really much of a gamer anymore. He's got a lot of kids, and he's just busy, and he kind of wanted Frobaz had this shield, like the little portable shield.
Oh, yeah, he did.
And so he took the shield and gave Frobaz the GeForce GTX 980 Ti card, which is totally awesome.
Yeah.
Like there were maybe tears from a grown man at this event from the generosity there. That was really cool. And so already Frobaz is building himself a pretty nice PC. He got a 4970K or 4790K and a motherboard and 16 gigs of RAM, and was talking about his setup. And then Id Chafee was asking for games that he could play on the Shield, so I gave him a suggestion in that forum thread.
Nice. I'm glad it went to a good home in the end.
So I was hoping that Luke would be on the podcast, because Luke was there too.
Yeah, he was.
And a bad thing, I have to tell you guys this story. A bad thing happened. I did a bad thing at the barbecue, which was Luke showed up with a gift for me of a bottle of 10-year tawny port. He had checked with my wife about what I like to drink. My wife had checked with my friends because she doesn't know what I drink. And eventually it had become clear that it would be nice to have a bottle of port. So he brought me a bottle of port. And I was like, that is awesome. Thank you. But I'm flying to San Francisco tomorrow, and I'm not checking a bag. And I can't, I've seen what happens when you put alcohol in your bag.
Yeah.
In the depressurized situation where you do check. And it's all bad. You can't do that. You can't transport this port transport was a problem. And so I was like, well, I don't know what to do. But at the end of the night, I was like, I'll just bring this down to the beach where we're doing the last thing, the campfire and hot dogs and stuff. And I will drink this along with everybody else, because I'm not going to drink a ton. I got to go to the airport early in the morning. And then like everything went late. And Jeff, I don't know if you knew this, but the usual schedule, like the fireworks went late. It was like 10:30 and we hadn't started the campfire really. And so that wasn't, I had to leave. I had to go to the hotel and get ready to get up in the morning. And
yeah,
so
I left right as all that was starting. So
that bottle of port was left sitting on a table, like up at the top of the hill, like at somebody, I'm sure when they cleaned it up, or maybe before, I don't know. I heard stories that somebody there had too much to drink, so I'm hoping maybe they were able to enjoy some fine tenure tawny port.
Well, you didn't know what happened to it?
No.
Gleek posted after, like, he says he goes around and gets all the unopened alcohol after the event, like the morning after, and he said he found it. And it was unopened. So
Gleek has it.
I think Gleek has your port.
That's not the best fate for that port.
He offered to. I think he offered to send it or hold on to it until the next event. So you might want to go check out the barbecue.
It'll be 11-year tawny port.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good plan, actually, if he can bring it back.
But yeah, go check out the barbecue thread and
okay. I posted in there and said something about the port, and then I didn't see any responses, but I guess I missed that. So anyway, Luke was very generous. It was a great gift, and I failed, basically, is what happened. I failed to take care of it. So it was bad. But I apologize, Luke, and I hope you can be with us next week. I think he's going to hear this because I think he's going to edit the show if he gets back from wherever he is. So we'll see. But yeah, the barbecue is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I will definitely be back if I'm able. So.
And Ben, you should go.
I'll go. I've only been around been around the site for all 12 of them. So
yeah,
one of these times I need to actually go.
I'm gonna ask Dr. Fish if we can do it a little earlier in the season next year because it's too close to when school starts.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah,
it was smack up against a lot of stuff this year.
Yeah, so that was tough. Anyway, but it was good. Well, let's move on though because we've got a ton of stuff to discuss. And Jeff, let's start with there's new phone stuff happening, and you have a story here. This is a rumor. It's an Apple rumor, right. So it could be completely wrong, but it sounds really plausible, right?
It does. So it was 9 to 5 Mac got a hold of a report from some sources, anonymous sources as always, who say the next iPhones, presumably the iPhone 6s and the 6s Plus, Apple's going to bump the camera specs on those phones. The current iPhone camera is 8 megapixels, and they expect that these will get a bump to 12 megapixels. And I guess there's no mention of increasing sensor size, so I guess they're putting a new image signal processor on the system on a chip to counteract this increase in pixel density that usually produces noisier images. So I guess they're going to do some voodoo to kind of keep the image quality high. And then that beefier chip should allow these. If this is correct, it should allow the phones to record video at 4K too.
Yeah, which is really more of a sort of a storage and encoding issue than a sensor issue, because like the sensor can capture still images in the current phone higher res than 4K.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're moving tons of data off the sensor, though.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah.
And so presumably you would expect HEVC, H.265 encoding, and maybe more storage, a bigger data path, and all that on the ISP to make that happen. And it's one of those things that, like Android phones, some of the premium ones from Qualcomm especially, they're doing 4K recording.
I mean, a lot of Samsung phones have the ability. I don't know, like in which all of them have it, but Samsung is touting it as the next frontier. So
yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good. It's cool that you can do that. Like I just bought a 60-inch TV and I bought a 1080p because I don't sit 3 feet from the display. Like, and we're putting this in phones. Like, what? I don't understand entirely. Like, I don't know. Usually, Apple has been the one that's been kind of sensible about this stuff. Like, they held off on increasing the resolution of their sensors in order to make sure that they had good quality pixels instead. Right. Instead of more pixels. And now we're hearing this. And I hope it doesn't mean that they're getting caught up into, like, chasing features for competitiveness sake. instead of doing the right thing for the users.
Yeah.
And, maybe 4K video from a phone looks good on the right display. But it's certainly, not about what happens on the display of your little phone. I mean...
Right, because iPhones are, in general, the screen resolutions are pretty low compared to some of their competitors. The Retina display has enough pixel density to be good, but it's not like Quad HD or whatever.
It's true, but it's also the case that the Diamond Pixel and Pentile and various OLED subpixels patterns from Samsung have a lower resolution on the green pixels, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that the total PPI effectiveness is high enough that no one cares.
Yeah.
But it doesn't Apple's spec is kind of an honest PPI because they're not doing subpixel wizardry because they use IPS LCDs. So it's not. I don't know. I mean, right now, the Notes and the iPhone 6 Plus both have beautiful displays. The Note's a little sharper, but it not as much as the PPI number would tell you. So
yeah.
Anyway, hey, we got a dog attack.
Sure.
Oh, it was in the next room.
That's not nearly as exciting as if it were in the room with you.
Yeah. No, he's little, and somebody opened the door, I'm sure.
Anyway,
but yeah, I mean, the upgrade I'm really hoping for, because I'll be upgrading whatever they send out next month. I'll be upgrading to. So I hope, the camera improvements would be nice, but I think what everybody really wants is more RAM.
That's exactly what I want. Is my biggest beef in the iPhone 6 Plus review, and since then, having used the iPhone 6 Plus for almost a year since then, it's my biggest beef still.
Yeah.
Right? I want more RAM so that when I switch apps, that I don't have to reload the thing again.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous.
And it is. It's really bad now. I want so much more RAM. I want 4 gigs. I want them to just overcompensate for the mistake of the 1 gig in the 6 Plus so that I can just have everything open all the time, because that's my biggest performance issue.
Well, I mean, we're going to find out soon, because they also announced today, right on the heels of this rumor, Apple put out invitations for their next event, which is going to be September 9th in San Francisco. That's the iPhone. That's where they expect, the Mac press expects these new iPhones to be unveiled. So we don't have long to wait to find out probably what Apple is putting in the new ones exactly.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and think about the possibilities too, because there are a lot of rumors around this. But first of all, I'm going to make a prediction, which is, this is an easy prediction, and this is totally me speculating, but it's good speculation, people, so just, okay. So we know that the S's usually, they keep the same basic case and chassis and all that, and then they increase performance, right? That's what they do on the sort of off-cycle years. We're due for a 6S, probably 6 Plus S, 6S Plus, whatever. I expect that we'll get a new SoC from Apple, and that they will continue to push on CPU microarchitecture, that will have a step up from the enhanced Cyclone core that they have in the current stuff, with more instructions per clock in an energy efficient fashion, but higher instructions per clock. And they'll continue pushing on that front. They already lead the market in that. The Cortex A57 is pretty good, but it's not as fast per core as what Apple does. I mean, you could say Intel, with Core M, if you're comparing, would compete there. But in terms of phones and those power envelopes and things that ship in high volumes, in phones, I'd say, basically at this point, Apple leads the market, and I expect them to continue there. So that's probably going to be one of the biggest things. I do expect more RAM, because we saw more RAM in the iPad Air 2, right?
Right.
So there's already precedent for that, and it's an obvious thing that they should do. And so a camera upgrade, maybe a display upgrade, I don't know, SoC upgrade, and RAM upgrade, and I'm happy. I think that's a nice thing, because they've had a lot of comfortable success with the 6 Plus. And 6 doing
well. The other thing that's supposed to come to this, I think they're trying to implement this force touch, haptic feedback across all their devices. That was the other thing that was rumored. I mean, it's not a big deal, but
right.
that could be an interesting thing too. So
yeah, well, and then look at the rest of their lineup, right? The iPad Mini still has like iPhone 5 guts, 5S guts, yeah. And it really, the Mini 2 and Mini 3 were the same thing except for that touch sensor. So it's overdue for an upgrade. And if they have a new SoC, they could put that in there, or they could waterfall down the A8 and it'd still be a huge upgrade, right?
Yeah.
If they have a new SoC that's substantially faster, one would expect them to put that into an iPad Air, which is their sort of flagship iOS device with the highest power envelope, and right now has the most RAM already, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And probably not in September, though, right? Don't they usually push that off?
Yeah, I mean...
iPads come later, usually, I think.
Yeah, and they also have, like, MacBooks.
Yeah.
They all of those... They skipped... Did they skip Broadwell for the most part? Are they, because Skylake is here, right?
It's weird. I think the dual core MacBooks, like the 13-inch MacBooks, got Broadwell,
and the MacBook standard 12-inch new thing has Broadwell.
Perhaps, but the Pros did not. They did not get the quad-core Broadwell mobile parts.
So you would anticipate that they skip that and go straight to Skylake. And
yeah,
any of that could happen at any point. Like it doesn't have to happen now, but we already have some Skylake shipping, and Apple has never really waited for Intel to announce its products before it has done its thing. And we know Skylake's total launch is coming and may well happen before September 9th. So I don't know what all they roll out at this one time, but they're at the end of product cycles on like everything. So I anticipate between now and the end of the year or the beginning of next year, early, like they're going to roll through updates all across the board.
Yeah, it'll probably be a good time.
Yeah,
good thing to watch.
Yeah.
So. Well, in 4K video, that probably also means an Apple TV too, right? Something that could actually play that video from the phone.
It could.
One would think. Yeah. Yeah.
That's another one of the major things that the Mac Rumors people suggested we could see.
Is a new Apple TV?
New Apple TV.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to see new software for it. I mean, I guess 4K and better hardware would be good, but...
Yeah. I mean, iOS 9 is coming too, so they could put, some version of that on the Apple TV. Who knows?
Yeah. So. There's a ton of stuff that is maybe... hopefully going to happen. Okay, we got one more phone thing that's not Apple, which people who don't like Apple will be pleased with, although they won't be pleased with what happened with Samsung, right?
Yeah.
So the Note 5, which is basically the 6S's competition, 6S Plus's competition, has a problem. And Bruno wrote this up, so I guess we just kind of roll with it. But
we'll
Jeff,
take it apart.
What happened?
Okay, so
something happened.
Yes. So the Note 5, the trademark of the Galaxy Note is that it has a pen that you can write on the screen with, like a stylus. But I guess with the Note 5, for some reason, they made like both ends of the pen symmetrical. So you can insert the pen backwards. And there are like little micro switches inside the Note that catch the ridged end on the top. And it... gets permanently stuck in there.
Yikes. And it damages the sensor that tells the Note that the stylus is in there?
Yeah, if you try and force it out, it breaks these little switches, I think. Someone tore one down and examined exactly why this happens. But yeah, it breaks the sensors that tell the Note whether the pen is in its little slot or not.
So so what have we heard yet? Is Samsung doing something about this? Because
they are not, because the manual says don't insert it backwards.
So you're holding it wrong.
Yes, don't insert it that way.
Wow.
But it's really funny though, because Leo Laporte, who hosts Twit, which is another tech podcast, he got a Note 5 and he had the pen in his Note 5 and he was just toying with it on air apparently, and he stuck it in backwards and caused this issue on air. So it's apparently really easy to just absentmindedly do this.
Wow.
And So I mean, it doesn't break. Well, I mean, it breaks the phone, but it doesn't ruin it permanently. Like, you just lose like automatic pin detection. Like, the phone doesn't know to launch this particular app when you pull the pin out.
So the question I have for you is, if Apple did this, would they be crucified or crucified upside down?
I think they'd be drawn and quartered.
Yeah.
I mean, it would. The outrage would be incredible, but yeah, I mean, just
if I was a Note 5 owner, I'd be outraged too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a premium device. Hopefully, at least hopefully, what they're doing, and this is a way to address it that some companies prefer, is if you have the problem, they'll fix it for you, right? But
yeah.
I mean,
I don't see how you fix this, because it's baked into the design of the device, and short of getting a new one.
The stylus is a little piece of plastic.
Yeah.
They could replace the stylus if there's a way to do it that solves this problem.
Yeah.
And it would cost them not much at all, right? That would be the thing I would think is a stylus like replacement would be like, or an exchange program, right? We're going to get the bad one out of your hands so you don't accidentally do it, and we'll give you this new one that doesn't have the problem. But I don't run Samsung, so they didn't ask me. Anyway.
So don't stick your Note 5 in or pin in backwards. It will break the phone.
Ugh. All right. Well, we'll have to see. I just don't know if they can not do anything. So we'll have to watch this and see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see what they do.
All right. So here's another story that's interesting. Ben, you wrote this. Windows 10 has hit 75 million devices in just a month. For the record, 75 of those are in my house.
And a million other hardware reviewers and nobody else, right?
Man, I just ridiculous. I mean, I was just like, oh, that has Windows 7. That has Windows 8. Like, oh, I pull out this ancient laptop and I'm going to... like, I don't ever use it, but I'm going to get a free thing. So here it goes.
It's amazing how people are drawn to that word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so 75 million devices. An unofficial unit of measure that I came up with was quarters of Macs. And so that's almost 4 years worth of Macs that could be running Windows 10 now. Maybe there are no other PCs that got it, except for mine and your 75. And there were some fun facts on Twitter that go along with that. Did you know that Cortana has told 500,000 jokes? That's only one for every 150 people. That's really sad. And something like 1 million hours. I didn't think this was going to be a big deal at all, but something like 1 million hours of gameplay streamed from the Xbox One to Windows 10 devices has happened since it launched, and that hasn't even been a month. That's only been a couple of weeks. And
doing it backwards.
Yeah, I know. I know. They're still a ways off, though. They said they want 1 billion devices in 3 years. Well, at the current pace, it'd only take them about another year, 370 more days. So they've still got a ways to go, but, they may make it. Who knows?
Yeah, I really, seriously, like everything except for our home theater PC, which has got Windows Media Center and can't be upgraded without destroying it. But almost everything else I've upgraded. I have an ancient Samsung NC20 based on like a VIA CPU, and it was like almost did it. It was almost at the end of the upgrade process, and then it like came back with an error when it was trying to boot, and it wouldn't go. So I'm gonna wait and see if they do like a little like hotfix for it or something later. But that, I don't know. No one ever uses that. It's so slow. It's 100% CPU just to do Windows updates for like 10 minutes after you boot it. But I'm like, well, maybe Windows 10 will be better. Like,
oh, they roll all the updates together now. It's a cumulative update that comes out. So maybe, who knows?
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I'm generally pleased with Windows 10. I'm not real happy with the way that it auto updates and sometimes auto reboots on you.
Yeah.
I think they need to do better there, because I'm kind of just used to having control of my computer. I leave a lot of things open, like different tabs and text editors and stuff, and I don't always save everything. And, I save my work constantly on a big project, but there's a lot of like critical stuff in a little editor tab that I may not touch. If
they need to, they need to save the state of any open apps if they're gonna force a reboot.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it seems like right now all you can do is like you can defer, but then it's going to happen, and so it reboots on you because you forgot later instead of sooner, which isn't enough. So they're going to have to change that eventually, I think, especially and maybe they've already got provisions for this, but anytime businesses are doing this, they're not going to stand for that. So
no, the enterprise version has some additional controls in terms of controlling when updates go out.
Yeah, well, I hope they do the right thing eventually with that. They generally have, I think, done the right things for the most part with Windows 10. It's still like a darker Windows 7 in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
it's not super different, but we'll see. Some numbers came out from DirectX 12, by the way, and I was not included in the list of people in the press to get this, and I was out at barbecue anyway or whatever. I guess what it shows generally is that there's some nice performance gains from Radeons, and
it was really surprising.
I've got maybe it was Oxide Games, Ashes of the Singularity. It's a pre-beta, and these are the same guys that did the Starswarm demo for Mantle. They've worked closely with AMD, and their game runs better in pre-beta form on the Radeon than on the GeForce. But it's funny because in DirectX 11 it's the opposite. The GeForce is better than the Radeon, as I understand it. And I've done a lot of this testing myself, and I've read a lot of articles. But what I understand is there's kind of a bigger gap between the Radeon's performance in DX11 and DX12 than there is for the GeForce. So
that sounds about right.
There's a lot of questions that I have about what this means. I think some people are taking this as, well, clearly the Radeons are just going to be better in DirectX 12 then. And like as a guy who's into GPU architecture, I have a really hard time imagining that the entire market shifts around an API change like that. I do think that AMD generally has a problem with the performance of its DX11 drivers and how they're somewhat CPU bound, and I think DX12 can help that. But I don't know if it shifts the math entirely. Anyway, I've got some numbers from that with the GeForce GTX 950, which was just released last week, and the Radeon R7 370, and I'm kind of in the middle of 12 projects, but eventually I'll publish those, and we'll get that done. In fact, that's one of the things that we should probably talk about that happened last week that I don't have on our list of stuff to talk about, guys.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So the GeForce GTX 950 came out, and this is 159 list, but like the versions of it from Asus and EVGA are closer to 169 or so. And this is just kind of, it slots into NVIDIA's lineup between the GTX 750 Ti, which is now around 109, 119, and 119, and the 960 at 199. And it's basically the same GM206 chip on the GTX 960, but slightly cut down. And what it really means is it's good for 1080p gaming, because the 750 Ti isn't bad for 1080p gaming, and it's substantially faster than the 750 Ti. It's a beefier chip with twice the data path to memory. I think no, it's the same data path to memory, but a higher frequency on the memory, more shaders, more ROPs, more texturing, all that stuff. So I've got a couple of them here that I've been testing. There's the Asus one, and then EVGA, and I will have a full review of that when I can manage to make it happen around everything else that's going on. In fact, I have like 3 of the 4 or 5 cards I'm going to test already tested, and I just need to compile the results. So we'll get that done, and we'll have a review. I think that this could be an attractive card for people who just want to do mid-range, like 1080p gaming. You don't need to spend much more than this these days to get a good experience.
I mean, heck, the 750 Ti at 120. I mean, that's a crazy accessible way into a pretty decent graphics card.
And you can stick that. Yeah, you can stick that into your mom's terrible Dell, and it doesn't even need a power input, an extra power input. So, and then here's another thing I've got here, which is also a card that somewhat new card that I haven't tested. The Radeon R7 370, which is Pitcairn, which you guys will recall was the Radeon HD 7870, and then the 7870 gigahertz edition rebranding, and then the R7 370, no, R7 270. Well, no, but they did a R7 265, and
I have an R9 270X behind me, and that's the same chip.
Okay, R9 270. Okay,
yeah,
and then the R7 370. It's the same chip. It's still potentially competitive as long as you don't care about power consumption. Like, it's going to use a little more power. It's also really close to what is in the PlayStation 4. Which is kind of an interesting thing to think about, like architecturally and all that. So that's the competition for the GTX 950, and I've got that tested in Ashes of the Singularity. I just need to look at I've got all these numbers. I haven't even looked at them. They're just like logged on a hard drive or on a SSD. Actually, there's no hard drives involved in the testing of these cards. So, so yeah. Anyway, so that happened, and we'll cover that. What else is going on?
But AMD released it didn't release, but they kind of provided more details on a much more interesting card today, right?
Yeah, it's weird because normally this would happen when the reviews come out. But they launched the card without any reviews, which is a little weird, and for reasons we'll talk about, is a little uncomfortable. But they already had told us back at E3. They talked about when they talked about the Radeon Fury for the first time that they're doing this R9 Nano, and they just basically gave us more details now. Same Fiji chip as the R9 Fury and Fury X. It's the same peak clock speed as the R9 Fury, but it's in a 6-inch board, HBM with the same data rate, so it's 512 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, 4096 shaders. 4 gigs of memory. It's the same thing as an R9 Fury in a lot of ways, but it's teeny. It only needs a 8-pin power input, and it's a 6-inch long board, and so it's kind of a you could they bill it as you can do 4K gaming in a mini ITX PC with this thing,
right?
And the weird thing about it is that between this and the R9 Fury is 100-watt power difference. And so they're saying it's the same clock, but the deal is that their power tune algorithm is going to be capped for power 100 watts less. And so dynamically, as it runs and decides what clock speed to use, it's going to be limited by power. Depending on the workload, the clock speeds maybe at some point can touch 1 gigahertz, but they're probably going to be lower. And we don't know exactly what the performance impact of that will be, but AMD is kind of claiming it's more or less going to perform like an R9 Fury and higher than like an R9 290X, 390X.
Then why does the Fury exist?
Well, I mean, a couple reasons, right? One thing is that this is a niche product. They're saying this is a co-flagship. And they're charging $650 for it.
Yeah, $650.
But
is the reason for its existence.
One way that you get this much lower power consumption with good performance is you bin your best chips for this product. So the ones that do best at lower voltage, you instead of giving them to the Fury X where you get higher clocks, you could give them to this where you get lower voltage, and like your best chips could give you good results. The other thing is just, and I talked about this in the article, Ben, to get that less 5 to 10% of performance out of big chips today, you wind up really cranking up the power consumption because it's voltage squared. And you've got to turn your voltage up to get your clock speed up. And so there's some magic in detuning, right? It looks crazy, 100 watts. But
no, I get this board. I'm curious why the vanilla Fury, the air-cooled big monster, Why do we have that then?
Oh, well, I think that the performance of that product was uncomfortably close to the GeForce GTX 980. If it would have been detuned anymore, that would have been bad, right? I mean, they had competitive reasons to do what they did. But yeah, I agree. This may be more attractive. Unfortunately, it costs $100 more than a Fury. So, but anyway, those are the specs. Here's a look at the board. Look at that thing. It's teeny. And there's nothing that competes really on the GeForce side. The closest thing is a mini ITX, like similar length board with a GTX 970 on it. That's a $350 card. This is a $650 card. That's slower than this, almost certainly. And although we haven't tested it, but this is kind of a different category. And AMD is hoping that they can wring a little bit of goodness out of the fact that, you know why they can do this, guys, is because the HBM, the high bandwidth memory that they use with the interposer where the GPU sits on it with it, that's a really small physical footprint. So they can build a teeny card because they've got a small setup with the GPU and memory packaged together compared to GDDR5 with your discrete chips that sit on the circuit board around it. So stacking gives them a small footprint. They're trying to take advantage. But okay, Ben, did you follow the numbers thing here with the performance on this?
Yeah, I did. I was following along right with you with in terms of the performance settings that they chose, the quality settings that they chose. It was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they did this with the Fury X. They released numbers. They said, "Oh, this is leaked." And then the world was free to publish the benchmark guide, the reviewer's guide numbers for the R9 Fury X before we were free to publish our own independent testing results. And when we published our own independent, their numbers showed that they beat the GeForce GTX 980 Ti with the Fury X, across the board. Our numbers showed that overall, the Fury X was slower than the 980 Ti, and it was pretty clear. And then so I went back and looked at their formula for testing for that reviewer's guide, and they had done some weird stuff. They had only tested without edge multi-sampling in the form of MSAA, anti-aliasing. They didn't use 16x anisotropic filtering, which is kind of, I think, a standard these days. It's the best way to do your texture filtering so it looks good. And they had turned the resolution up to 4K pretty much across the board, and then turned up the shader effects. And so what they did basically was bias their tests so that everything leaned on that big 8+ teraflop shader array without leaning so much on the other graphics, dedicated fixed function graphics hardware for texture filtering, for the backend for the ROPs, and all that, where generally speaking the GeForces might have been stronger. And so that's a way, it's kind of a formula that we know now, if you want the Fury to look better than the GeForce, do that. With the Nano, they released some new numbers. These are the first and only public numbers. They're straight from AMD, and they use the same formula for testing. So I've got a little table here in the article that shows the games, Battlefield 4, Crysis 3, Far Cry 4, etc. It shows the quality presets, all 4K resolution, 0x MSAA, generally 0x anisotropic filtering. The only AA they used is shader-based AA, which, some of those post-process shader AA techniques aren't bad, especially if you're performance constrained. They can be a good way to go, but the quality is lower than MSAA, and it uses different hardware, which again I think was their goal. So their numbers show that the R9 Nano is 30% faster than the GeForce GTX 970 Mini ITX Edition. When we test it, what I anticipate is going to be disappointingly not that big of a difference, because we're going to test it the way that you would play games and not the way that you would test to show the Fury is best or the Nano is best. So
is anisotropic filtering, is that really that big of a strain on a modern graphics card that they just dropped it?
I would put it this way. I don't think it's a big enough strain that you shouldn't like have it on to play games. It's the performance increase, and I've got this screenshot comparison. I don't know if it shows up on video, but the performance increase is not as big a payoff as the visual quality increase of leaving it on, right? Like, it's clearly the right thing to do, but it's also hard. You have to take a lot more samples to do it at 16x in ISO, and you've got to do a lot more blending. And I don't think anybody playing games and caring at all about image quality would turn anisotropic filtering off. But they did it because they had an agenda, in my view. I think that's why they did it. So yeah, I wouldn't turn it off.
I've never turned it off, and it's never seemed like a performance issue for me. I was just curious if it was really a big deal.
Back in the day, we used to do testing, and I guess I could try to pull this up, but it would be...
Oh yeah, I remember these.
We used to... Oh no, I hit the wrong button. Let me see, like my 8800 GTX review probably has something like that. We used to do testing with different levels of an ISO filtering.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's significant because I don't think that the algorithms have changed much on either side from then to now. Here's
there it is.
Right mark thing. And you can see this is basically bilinear on one side, and I can't get the whole friggin' thing in frame here. I don't know if I can do that or not. There we go. Bilinear, trilinear, tri plus and ISO 2x, 4x, 8x, and 16. And basically, especially as you go toward 4x, then you get a pretty significant like decrease. And there are two different quality levels also, because their algorithms can be like, they can cheat. In fact, if you look up in the review, there's all these like weird flower test patterns and stuff. Most of that stuff got worked out by the time we got to that DirectX 10 generation. But prior to that, at some angles, polygons didn't get filtered as much, and it was ugly. But the performance hit was real, is real, in fact, Ben, I'd say. But it's just something that's kind of built in right now. We all kind of assume we're going to do the right thing and use at least 4 or 8x anisotropic filtering these days, because it's fundamental, like base level image quality stuff, right? You do that, you do trilinear. They cheat a little. They don't always do all the trilinear blending and all the sampling, but they do enough that both brands, Radeons and GeForces, look nice, and it doesn't bother you. There's not a lot of texture sparkle or things like that. So, yeah. Anyway,
they're weird settings.
They're weird settings. They don't belong, and we'll see what happens. My message is just wait until we review it, because you know the numbers they did this very deliberately. They released numbers before reviewers had them out there, so that their story gets told the way they want. And you know, I wasn't really cooperating when I wrote this up.
I guess.
I don't like that, right?
I mean, I don't like the entire premise. Like, there are cases out, many ITX cases out there that can fit like a GTX 980 Ti. So unless you're really, really trying to get in on the space constrained thing, I mean, just get a mini ITX case that can fit a 980 Ti or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's just they're making their own playing field and then winning on it, and I don't. It feels a little weird, but
yeah,
it's okay though. I mean, it's a kind of a unique product. It's something they can do because of HBM, and
right,
like that's fine, right? I mean, if people want that, that's fine. But I just wanted to be honest about performance. So we'll see, and we need to test it too for acoustics and things like that. They gave us a number that doesn't mean anything to me, because I don't know how they tested acoustics. So
yeah,
you know, I think once we've done a bunch of comparative testing, we can show you guys numbers compared to a bunch of different things. You'll have a feel for it. And that's a plan. So I don't know when. Hopefully, they said September 10th the products are shipping. My hope is that sometime between now and then we get one in Damage Labs and we can test it.
So yeah, and speaking of small form factor PCs, back when they revealed the R9 Nano, they also talked about Project Quantum, which is AMD's kind of fancy. I don't know. I mean, you saw it. You were there, Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, how big is this thing? Like,
oh, not too big. I mean, it's I don't know, a foot wide or less.
Yeah,
probably less. And then less than that in height, 8 inches or so, or less in height. And it's got 2 chambers, and then in the middle is like a little like connecting thing with some lights. It's kind of funky.
Yeah.
And they were kind of
looking. Yeah. Sorry.
No, they were just showing off the possibilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a neat looking piece of hardware for sure. So anyway, I guess they made several of these like to take around on the road and demo, and one of them died, I guess, because of its hard life on the road. So they gave it to another publication, and they tore it apart and took a look inside, and they've made something pretty interesting here. So the top chamber is entirely given over to like a 180 millimeter radiator square, I think, and then the cooling reservoirs up top and the cooling pump, and then the coolant lines snake back through that middle pedestal section. And then in the lower chamber, they used a heavily modified off-the-shelf motherboard to make this work. Like it's an ASRock, however you say that.
ASRock.
ASRock. But yeah,
yeah, let's pretend there's a Z there instead of like ASRock. Some kind of a like where you need an enema.
Oh boy.
But yeah, so they crammed a i7-4790K, an Intel CPU, into this thing on that ASRock Z97 motherboard, and they also put a single GPU Fury card in there. So, and then the way they cool all this is there's this big custom water block that sits between the CPU and the GPU in that bottom chamber. And then all that's piped into the radiator above.
It's a concept, right? So this is like a concept car at a show. They're going to show it off, take pictures. People go, "Ooh, it looks interesting," and then nothing happens. Maybe something happens. Maybe somebody at Lenovo or Dell looks at this and says, "You know what? Maybe we should really do that," because there was a lot of interest in it. But AMD doesn't sell PCs directly to the public, so it's got to be somebody that they partner with or something like that for this to actually happen. It is neat, though. I mean, I think that there are possibilities. We talked about the whole like last 5 to 10% and what happens to power consumption and size when you have to like crank your chips up, but you can detune a lot of the big fast parts in a PC, make them a lot more power efficient, and cram them into a lot smaller space than what a traditional like ATX case is. And this is sort of a here's one of the possibilities kind of thing. It's kind of neat. Now I looked at some of the pictures, and it'd be a nightmare to work on.
Yeah, this is not like a bare bones. This is not like a mini ITX thing that you build up with your own parts. It would be a complete system. If they were to sell it. So
it's not for me, but it's kind of cool, and I would like to see more, interesting concepts. I mean, we've had ATX as a standard forever. And you can really, especially with how good liquid cooling is now, you can arrange stuff in weird, funky ways, and it's not too hard. So, maybe things. I don't know that I totally share the excitement about making the volume of the cases smaller. I don't care if my PC is a little larger, but I like the idea of neat designs. So, I mean, just because I'm recognizing case volume, shrinking that down can be really hard. And you can compromise on performance. Basically, you create a cooling problem for yourself. More volume, it makes it a lot easier to deal with heat and noise. So, I don't know. Some of these guys are pushing on volume. Falcon Northwest had a little pedestal-based little thing that we looked at a couple of years ago. And, it's neat, but, like, just make it 30% wider, and you didn't do all that awesome engineering to make it just work, but it's quieter, you know?
Yeah.
And no one cares. Like, no one, anyway. So.
Yeah.
This thing would look cool in the living room, though, you know, under or next to the TV.
Yeah, that's your Steam machine right there, man.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I'd love to see some cool designs and things like that. Let's move on though.
Yeah.
To...
So on the NVIDIA side of the aisle today, Dell actually launched its first G-Sync monitor.
Which is finally, right? I mean,
yeah,
they've kind of held out.
Yeah. So this thing, it's called the S2716DG, which we'll say
easy to remember.
Yeah.
The old DG.
Yeah. So it's it's a 2560 by 1440 screen with G-Sync, 144 hertz maximum refresh rate.
It's an IPS panel?
No, it's not.
Oh.
We don't know. The problem is they didn't say, which these days is usually an indication that it's not, but the spec sheet says it's a 1 millisecond response time, which is usually a twisted pneumatic or TN panel.
But it's $800.
Yeah. It's $800.
It needs to be
Yeah.
IPS, right?
So, yes, because Acer has an IPS G-Sync, 1440p, 144 hertz panel, called the XB270HU, I think, and that's a $700 panel.
Mm-hmm.
And then Asus may be releasing, I think they're releasing a G-Sync version of the MG279Q, and that's a $600 display, $500, I don't know. So, but it'll carry a premium because it's G-Sync, but $800 is pretty outlandish.
Yeah.
Given this thing's specs, I think that was the ROG Swift's starting price, and that was the first G-Sync monitor, and it had a TN panel. So
I think it's a big deal though that Dell's getting into this, right?
Yeah,
I mean they make really good monitors. Like, I'm very comfortable recommending them, and this thing has almost no bezels on the sides.
Yeah. I mean, it's good looking.
Yeah, and like they always get the physicals right. Like, it's probably gonna pivot and tilt and swivel and do all the things you want and have I don't know about all the inputs you want. That's one of the things. Well, it does say HDMI, right?
Right.
That's one of the things that G-Sync has lacked. It's usually just a single display port and you're done.
Yeah, and it's not clear whether that HDMI port will let you do G-Sync, but at least there's a second input there in case you need it.
Yeah, I doubt it will let you do G-Sync, but just having that, like, it's hard to buy a display that's $800 and see one port on it and be like, I'm done forever. I plug a GeForce into this and that's it, So yeah.
We will be watching what Dell does in this space, I think. This does not feel quite right, but who knows?
So I want to talk about variable refresh and the drama between FreeSync and G-Sync now, because at IDF we had a very significant development in that.
Yes.
Which came around. So just roll back real quick. When I first reviewed my first FreeSync monitor, I finished that review and I was pleased with the product, and kind of just sort of realized the next thing that has to happen now that we've variable refresh can be a standard because AMD has laid the groundwork. VESA has adopted this adaptive sync, standard for the world, and the monitor chip makers who make the scalers, 3 of them, have already built chips that have FreeSync support, and it doesn't really cost much of anything more to build that standard monitor. But what needs to happen next is Intel needs to back this standard, because AMD cannot be out there on their own. They don't have enough market share and enough clout by themselves. You can't. One company can't make an industry standard happen, generally. So Intel ships, in terms of unit volume, more graphics solutions than anybody else on the PC, because so many of them, whether it's laptops or low-end desktops or whatever, just have integrated graphics. And furthermore, integrated graphics where the performance is limited is one of those places where variable refresh is needed most, because you really feel the display quantization when your frame rate is low. So I wrote a little like come to Jesus thing at the end of my review and was like, hey, Intel, like, you need to back this. You should have written your press release already, right? And nothing happened for a long time. But at IDF, they had a little session called Fellows Uncensored. They had the Intel Fellows. They had like 20 of these or 15 of these folks who are like distinguished engineers and architects at Intel who have the fellow status. They've got to really done something at Intel to get that status. And there's a guy named David Blythe who back in the day worked at Microsoft on DirectX and now is the chief graphics software architect at Intel, who was there in the fellow session. And I just stood up and asked him, are you guys, is Intel going to support this standard? And he basically said, yes, we are favorably inclined towards standards like Adaptive-Sync, and we do plan to support this optional extension to DisplayPort. And he didn't say when it would happen in Intel products, but it was basically Intel, like somebody important at Intel Graphics saying, we're going to do it. Which moves the industry, right? That's a big deal. And the sooner that happens, the sooner just that gets voiced, right? The sooner then we can move toward getting variable refresh to be a standard. I'm happy for NVIDIA to still sell their G-Sync stuff and build more innovations into that, but I want to see every monitor that you could buy have variable refresh for gamers. And that's the way this happens. And so, interesting question about Intel is, can their hardware now that they're shipping, like in Skylake or Haswell or whatever, support variable refresh on the display outputs? And the answer to that, according to a source that I have, is that they have to build that into future GPUs, IGPs. So their display block now cannot do what is necessary for variable refresh for VESA Adaptive-Sync, but it can eventually happen. And we don't know. We don't have a time frame. Does it happen with Kaby Lake, the next thing after Skylake? Does it happen with Cannon Lake? I don't know. But they're going to build it in at some point, and they're going to support it. And so that's the news. And it means that VESA Adaptive-Sync, which is like the real standard, AMD's brand of FreeSync is their own brand. But the real standard behind this that is basically that everybody can use is VESA Adaptive-Sync. That's going to be an industry-wide thing. And now what we need, now that Intel has voiced this, is to pound on NVIDIA to go ahead and say, we're going to support this too and make it happen. Because they literally, guys, we know their displays already support it. They could flip the switch in their driver tomorrow, and everything that's based on Kepler and Maxwell, all of those G-forces could support VESA Adaptive-Sync.
So NVIDIA has like mobile G-Sync, right?
Yeah.
So have I heard this correctly, that is just basically Adaptive-Sync type panels?
Well,
no?
it's complicated, right? G-Sync is NVIDIA's marketing brand, and also they have a solution around that involves a module that goes into a desktop display. On laptops, you don't need a separate special module to support adaptive refresh because the GPU has a more direct connection to the panel. And so they built a solution that still has G-Sync branding for certain gaming laptops. And I think that there are certain behaviors from the module that you get in the mobile version of G-Sync that the GPU controls. And so it has a G-Sync-like experience. The Adaptive-Sync standard from VESA is looser and is kind of a subset of everything that NVIDIA does with G-Sync, right? And when you're talking about a laptop, I don't think you would say they're doing Adaptive-Sync because it's sort of the GPU talks straight to the panel and it does whatever it's going to do. However, it works a lot more like Adaptive-Sync would in the sense that there's no GeForce module, right?
Okay.
But, basically the GeForce module replaces a scalar ASIC in a desktop display. That's just a different thing on the desktop than the way the laptop the GPU talks more directly to the panel. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
yeah.
So
it's not exactly the same, but it's starting maybe down that path, and it's why you think maybe Kepler and Maxwell would already support Adaptive-Sync.
Yeah, I mean, Adaptive-Sync happens over DisplayPort. It's just an extension to the DisplayPort spec. And the things that you need to do that, clearly they already have because they're doing it with G-Sync. So they could support Adaptive-Sync capable displays that are on the market now. I almost guarantee you. If I'm wrong about that, they can come and tell me. I don't think I am.
Well, then really, it's time to light the torches and grab the pitchforks. Let's go, right?
Right. And like I said, I want G-Sync to continue. I think they're going to do some interesting things. They've basically said that they're going to they're looking into replacing, the way display is refreshed now is left to right and then top to bottom. It draws the screen. I think there will be a G-Sync 2.0 or whatever they call it that will do a more quasi-random refresh of different regions of the display instead of painting the screen over and over in the same pattern. And I think that will look better when they do it. And I love the fact that a GPU company is involved in displays enough to make things like that happen. So I'm not saying death to G-Sync here, but I would really like to see the variable refresh stuff become standardized and everybody have access to it, because it's time, right? The FreeSync stuff works well enough that we should just go ahead and move on from the proprietary stuff being out there as the only path for GeForce owners, and not being able to just pick up a display and get variable refresh regardless of what video card you have, which is, that's a key thing in the PC industry, right? You want an ecosystem based on standards.
Well, then, if you don't mind backing up for just a second, you have an R7 370 in the lab that is like a 4-year-old GPU at this point. That card won't support FreeSync, right?
No, it won't, because it's such an old GPU from AMD that the display block doesn't have what it takes. Right. So you need to have almost everything in the 300 series R9 and R7s does have what you need. I think this is the only exception in that lineup.
Okay.
And they didn't build a new GPU this size, so it's still around. But other than that, like the R9 380 and everything beyond on up to the Nano and Fury and all, those all support it.
Okay.
So, and on the mobile side, I think they've had what's necessary for a long time to do that. So, anyway, so yeah, that's that. Jeff, let's talk about, we had one big review recently. Let's talk about your review of the CoolerMaster MasterCase 5. This is a unique concept, right? So what is the concept behind this thing?
Okay, so CoolerMaster, I guess, went to the drawing board, and when they were planning out their future products, they said, we're going to offer fewer items in our catalog, but we want people to be able to modify those products to their needs. So we'll provide perhaps some modular parts they can add, or take off, or just change in order to make the product work the way they want. And so this MasterCase 5, is the first example of what they call this freeform system, or this freeform philosophy. And so,
yeah, but what does that mean? What does that mean? Like, what is the deal with this thing?
Well, okay, so it's supposed to be really modular, and you can't really tell this by looking at it. I guess that's the real point of this product. So you start with this kind of base case, which you can see on screen there, and then like all the outer panels can come off, like the plastic covers on those top handles can come off, and you can replace them with parts that CoolerMaster sells, or I guess if you're ambitious, if you're a modder, You can 3D print parts to go on it, or just make your own, however you'd like.
So did they provide like CAD files for that?
Well, they did an interview with us a couple months back and said that that's something they may provide eventually. Like our contact there said, that we can't see any reason why we wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something they may do in the future. But right now, this thing just has been on the market for a couple weeks at most, and so that ecosystem isn't fully fleshed out yet.
Right.
So.
Okay, but let's see. What are these parts that we have that are custom with this?
Okay, so the parts they sent me to play around with demonstrate this freeform system. So there's a and this is one of my beefs with the case, but we'll get to that in a second. They have a radiator top panel, or top panel take radiators. There's this fancy mesh cover that goes on top of it. It's kind of got these angular sides. So that changes the styling of the case. And then there are these drive cages. There's a triple 3.5-inch drive cage and a dual 3.5-inch drive cage that you can buy and swap into. And if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see like the construction of the case. Like the interior has these like sort of pegboard holes in it. So you can move these drive cages around. You can put them anywhere on the front side of the case that you want them. So that flexibility is kind of also what they're talking about with the modularity or this freeform system or whatever. And it works, I think. Like I had an opportunity to play around with it when I was building. And they're not crazy, and it's not entirely just marketing. But so when we put all these parts on the case, like they're offering two versions of this. You have this base MasterCase 5 and then this MasterCase 5 Pro, which includes this radiator-friendly top panel, the top cover, and a couple extra drive bays, plus the windowed side panel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a few bucks extra. It's the base MasterCase retails for $110, and then this MasterCase Pro will retail for $140. But the weird thing about this case is you get more than $30 of value if you buy the Pro.
Well, compared to if you bought the parts.
Yeah, if you bought the parts separately, because we have the prices here for these parts, and just like the top panel alone with that cover is $17 direct from CoolerMaster, and the windowed side panel is $25. So it's really weird, like how the pricing worked out with this. But
yeah, you're right. There's a lot more. You're paying $30 more for
$30.
the Pro. And it's I think it's way better looking with the side windowed side panel and the mesh on the top there. I also think I do think it's good looking. Like it's different. It's not the same as everything else. Although it is the same as everything else in the sense that it's inspired by F-117A stealth fighter. Like its radar signature would be low, but you said this is a sort of a metallic type of, like, it looks gray, right? But it's not really just jet black.
It changes. Yeah, it changes under the light because we use a white backdrop for our products, and so this looks lighter than it actually is in real life. But it can take on like different shades depending on how light is hitting it. It's got this subtle metallic flake in the finish. So one thing that let's just get out there is you want to think about fractal design whenever you review a case. Yes.
And Ben, I said we had a drinking game for reading one of his case reviews, which is if he mentions fractal design, take a drink. There's one rule. But you'll be drunk at the end of it. It could be a Corsair review. It doesn't matter. You'll be drunk at the end.
I have a fractal case for my PC too. It's okay, Jeff.
Fractal makes good stuff,
Sure.
But he talked about them a lot. Like I was seeing Mandelbrot's and stuff. Like,
okay. To be fair, this case, I think it's a complementary comparison. I think with Fractal's stuff because this, Fractal, at least the Define R5 uses a lot of metal in its construction. It's a nice heavy case. This is also extensively based on metal parts. Like the only plastic on it is the front panel and maybe the covers for the handles. Everything else is a metal frame. It's 23 pounds of metal
Right. Is it mostly steel, or is it aluminum?
Yeah, it's all steel. It's all steel.
So see, in my view, like plastic is at the bottom, steel is next, and then aluminum goes beyond that, like in terms of construction materials for cases that you commonly see. And I like metal cases. I pay a little more for a metal case. I mean, you can have had this for multiple generations of builds. And but I know when you look at this and you're like, but for like $110, there's Corsair 450D and the Fractal Design R5 and even the Silencio 652S from CoolerMaster, which is what my PC is in, which is great. Mm-hmm. It's great, but it's plastic. Yeah. Like all of them are, really, right? And it is hard. Like I've said before, don't spend any more than that on a case. Like you don't need to get a wonderful case.
Absolutely not.
But this thing is higher grade. Like just in terms of the construction, the metal, all that stuff. So, I mean,
we could get further into this, but we won't because it's boring. But
the thing about it is that once you realize that, you kind of want to go for the Pro, right?
Yeah,
because you want all the stuff.
Right. It's just I think it's a better value overall because it just like the base MasterCase has two 3.5-inch bays. It just feels skimpy, and you can't put radiators on the top panel. Here comes a Fractal Design comparison, but like the $80, $90 Define S from Fractal Design, you can put like a huge top-mounted radiator on it without any extra parts. So, like if you're in the market for this kind of premium-ish case, what's $30 more? Because I think it is providing real value here.
Yeah.
So
I think late in the review process, CoolerMaster told us about some of the other things that they're going to provide as modules for this.
Yeah. Just as we published, CoolerMaster sent us an email and said, we're going to make brackets for liquid cooling reservoirs and liquid coolant pumps. They also expect there are going to be a couple more radiator mounts and fan mounts. I don't know where they're going to put them, but I guess we'll find out. And, like graphics card support brackets, and then they'll make an entirely transparent side panel, which could look, pretty cool. So.
And so I don't want to, there's a lot to say about this. I'm going to buzz through some of what you said in the review.
Go for it.
You said that it's a dual chamber design. But which is weird, but it's good to build in. You can move things around. 3.5-inch. You could have more 3.5-inch drives in this thing than you ever want.
Especially with liquid cooling installed. Like that's the really distinctive thing about the Freeform system is that you can keep 3.5-inch a lot of 3.5-inch drives in it, like up to 5 maybe, with radiators in the front panel, which is not something that every case can do. So that's really nice.
And so generally a decent build experience, and then you said, okay, you tested against a Fractal Design Define S as your, and basically, I guess to summarize your results, it was very comparable in terms of temperatures and noise to that product.
It's pretty close. Especially like with the sound, with the noise levels, like it's not going to dampen any loud components.
Mm-hmm. Not with the mesh.
Right? Yeah, not with the mesh, and especially not with just the solid metal side panels with no foam on. But it did a good job. Like it's pretty close to the Define R5 even. It's like within a couple of decibels. So that's excellent work.
Yeah. And so
something, since this is modular and since somebody at CoolerMaster might be listening to this, make some foam insulated panels and send them to us.
Yeah, it might be nice to. Yeah, it might be nice to make a quiet version, right?
Yeah, and they could do that.
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting, and I guess that this is not surprising. Your conclusion was that you've given a TR recommended award to the Pro version.
Yeah, the MasterCase Pro.
You think is the better value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, the base one at its current, at $110, it's not quite fully featured enough. Like if they knocked a few dollars off the price, it would be easier to consider. And then because that leaves you room to upgrade later, maybe not entirely to the MasterCase Pro specs, but you can get some of the modular parts and still be ahead. But with with only a $30 difference, it's hard to recommend the base model, I think, even though it is a good solid case.
Yeah, well, it's I guess it's a little like the Define S in that it's really bare bones.
Yeah. But the Define S...
Then I just made a fractal comparison. So.
But yeah, I mean, the problem with the Define S is that's all you get. Whereas with this, you could conceivably spend more money and get more stuff and expand it in the future. I just don't think there's enough of a margin left in the price to allow someone to get in on the entry level and then work their way up and have that make sense. So
okay, so the next thing on our agenda is there are several things related to revelations made at IDF and then this week at Hot Chips and Hot Interconnects, including new Xeon Phi, the OmniPath architecture, which is a new interconnect for supercomputers, basically. And then last week we also got, basically at IDF, Intel released a bunch of stuff about the Skylake microarchitecture. And I went to those sessions and I talked to the architects, asked questions, took notes. And here's the deal, guys. I'm not going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
But next week, I think we're going to have David Cantor join us and just dive deep into Skylake now that we have all the architecture info. So I'm going to try and work on a summation of what we know about the architecture, which will be as good as I can do it. And then David will explain what it really means with like real precision. Oh, but that's 6 stages. And, so hopefully that'll happen next Thursday. And, we can get into that. I think what I'd like to do now to close out the show, because we're near the end, is
we do have one question.
Yeah, let's handle any reader questions, guys. If you're in the chat and you do have questions for us or things you'd like to hear us discuss before the show ends, go ahead and throw them in there now while we deal with the first question. And we only have one. Let me see.
Yeah, it's only one so far.
Okay.
So Dr. Domino Dog 51 asks, do you guys think board partners like Sapphire and Gigabyte will make full-sized R9 Nanos with clock speeds similar to the Fury X? Can they do that?
Isn't a full-sized R9 Nano a Fury?
Yeah.
And they make Furies that are almost as fast as the Fury X, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's leeway in there for like totally repurposing something else into that.
Well, if this is a restricted design, right? Board partners can't mess with this too much, right?
No, it's the R9 Nano is not restricted like the Fury X.
Oh, okay.
AMD has said that there will be custom versions of the Nano, but I don't think that means there's a way to build a custom Fury X. If somebody wanted to do that, I think they would have done it with the Fury.
I see.
Especially because the Nano is like a way lower power target and all that. Like functionally speaking, it's not going to spend a lot of time at the same clock speeds as the Fury X, which has, let's face it, way more cooling, right? But there could be some interesting things that happen because AMD said that the R9 Nano will get, like there may be some versions with water blocks. So if what you're looking for is something that's not a Fury X but is water-cooled and based on a Fiji chip, there might be a Nano for you. But my suspicion is that they're not going to let people move into the same power envelopes as the Fury X. Like, I think AMD will probably keep them out of that so that they don't have folks stepping on their toes. Then again, maybe they don't care as long as it costs like the same like money to put it together at this point. The bigger question to me about all these is like you can barely buy a Fury now, right? Like what's the supply going to look like? And they said that they're building up supply for September 10th of the Nano cards. Maybe there will be a bunch, or maybe the fact that they price it $650 will keep demand down to the point where the supply is sufficient, which is what you want to do, right? I mean, if they don't have enough, then keep the price up, right?
Yeah, sell what you can for as much as you can.
Yeah, and I think that with HBM and this big GPU, probably it's HBM, but they seem to have a supply constraint right now. I think, if you're AMD and you have a $650 video card and it keeps selling out, the last thing you want is that scenario. You want to sell as many as you possibly can, and they're not supplying the market with enough. So, yeah. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, I went and got one out of the podcast post. So, Naturally Wiki asks, Intel's QuickSync feature has been quite important on the workloads my, Core i5, i7 2600K sees regularly. And over the years, I've been tempted to jump to Ivy and Haswell for that reason, but I've been holding out. Would it be possible to see some QuickSync testing using Broadwell and Skylake compared to the older generation chips? I'm interested in the performance gains, if there are any.
There are some, clearly. They've at least they've been saying, look, we doubled this so we could do 4K, and we doubled that so that we could do multi 4K streams. And as they've gone on, they've improved that hardware quite a bit. I don't know if I'll have time to test it or when. This is a question of that.
Yeah.
Or if I could send you guys some chips, have one of you guys do it.
But they are better. They are.
They are. So. I think the biggest problem with QuickSync is, they're two maybe related issues, but it's not as widely supported as I would like. So I just, for making videos for YouTube and stuff, or doing what we're doing here, and editing and processing stuff, I wind up using Handbrake and CPU encoding out of a editor program and stuff like that. QuickSync is an option, but it doesn't support like Twitch streams really get compressed a lot. So everything we record is super compressed, right? QuickSync doesn't support really low bit rates, and so it's useless for what I do. They've gotten more flexibility over time on what amount of things they support, but with Haswell's QuickSync, I haven't been able to find that combination of software and bitrate support to where it works for me. And so, man, I don't know. If you're a reader, if you're a listener, and you have a program and a usage like this questioner does, where you really use QuickSync a lot, and it's something that a lot of people would use, let us know what it is, because I feel like that the biggest problem with it is just support and capability to do the things people do. Everybody I've talked to about it kind of says, yeah, you need to use the CPU for that. And they don't mean the QuickSync block, they mean just a CPU encoder. So that's one question, but yeah, we know some things that we could test the performance on. So I'll put that into the long list of things I wish I could do if I had more time. And maybe at some point it comes out the other end as an article.
I do have a 6600K, so if we come up with a reasonable test scenario, maybe it's something I could work on.
Yeah, and we need to get you the things that compare to that and the motherboards and that stuff, but that can be done. So maybe you're waiting for the next thing, aren't you?
I am.
Okay.
I'm going out of town for a couple of days early in September, but after that I'm all yours and my other bosses.
Right. So BJ May 81 asks, where's a Skylake Core i5 review? The answer to that question is that Intel has for several years refused to provide the press with samples of Core i3 and i5 products. That is true again with the Skylake generation. I can tell you, because I asked last week and I asked again when I returned via email, and I got confirmation we're not getting any to review. Doesn't mean we can't do it. We got to buy them, and we can't buy them yet because they're not out. So the answer is we're not going to have a review of the Skylake Core i5 or even a 6600K until we can buy them. And I may just have to buy a 6600K. They are out there now. But I've got a ton of things to do that don't involve buying stuff that somebody doesn't want me to review. So, but I think that needs to happen. I did that with Haswell, and I've got comparable Core i5, i3 products to test against. So at some point we'll do that, hopefully with Skylake as well. So it does, though. It frustrates me. Intel has not been good at supporting the enthusiast community by providing reviewers with multiple models of their products. I don't have to have every single one. They have way too many models. I don't want to test them all. But I'd like to test obviously interesting Core i3 and i5, and we'll have to just work with you guys and the support we get from the community to be able to buy those. But we have to wait till they're available. So, other questions?
Yeah, there is one more. So Fax Modem asks, any rumors floating around about Pascal yet, which is NVIDIA's Maxwell successor GPU?
Oh, man. I mean, NVIDIA held up the thing and said, here it is with HBM.
Yeah.
Right? It's got HBM, we know. What I anticipate is it has HBM 2.
Yeah.
And I think probably that when Pascal comes out, they'll have HBM 2 up and down their product stack. And they may do that before AMD has HBM up and down its product stack, because all AMD has done for several generations is build a new big GPU and then sell the older ones, rebranded. Mm-hmm. Not all. They built Tonga, which was a more of a not quite peak one. But I'm not sure. Other than that, NVIDIA is a hard one to get rumors out of, and a lot of the things that you see out there, which I don't track all of them all that closely, honestly, they're not very good usually. So I don't know if you guys heard things.
Yeah. I mean, the last time I visited anything about Pascal was back in March when they introduced it at well, they didn't introduce it, but they revealed some more information about it at GTC, and that basically confirmed the same things we know right now, which is that it will include what we now know as HBM and just other stuff for like deep learning and like huge complicated visual processing problems, but
lots of FP16 support.
Yeah.
And which is, they've already built a bunch of that stuff into some of their later chips now.
Yeah. So we still don't really know much about it.
Yeah.
That's it for questions that I can find. If anybody else has anything in the Twitch chat, please submit it now or wait until next week.
I think it's too late, man, because I think we're ready to call this thing.
Okay.
So.
Sweet. Well.
Thanks to everybody who joined us on the live stream and the chat. Ben and Jeff, thanks for putting up with me talking too much.
Yeah, it was
all good.
It was great. Yeah.
And next week, I think we will have David Cantor to talk Skylake architecture. So that should be good. And you guys don't have to. I'll just do that one-on-one with David. And if that doesn't work out, then we'll just do this again.
Yeah, sure.
Hopefully Luke will be back, and maybe we'll have a bottle of port. I don't know how that will get involved.
Maybe he could ship it to you with, I don't know, FedEx or something.
Yeah, right. I can give him my FedEx number, so we got an account. So, yeah. Anyway, well, thanks, everybody. Take care, and we will see you probably next week, and maybe not the whole crew, but if not, then it'll be a very, very special episode of the Tech Report podcast. So take care.
See ya.